I was checking the weather radio when I heard the crunch of gravel in my driveway, set the device down, and walked to the front window, already knowing what I'd find. Another family had made the drive up from the valley, probably following some online hiking guide that made these mountains sound like a weekend playground. The silver SUV parked next to my old pickup looked expensive, the kind of vehicle that spent most of its time in suburban driveways. 4 doors opened at once, and out stepped exactly what I expected. 2 adults and 2 kids, all wearing gear so new it probably still had tags attached yesterday. The man stretched his back and surveyed my cabin like he was sizing up a quaint tourist attraction. The woman gathered a small backpack and water bottles, moving with the efficient purpose of someone used to organizing family outings. Their teenage daughter emerged last, already looking bored, tucked earbuds into her jacket pocket. The younger boy, maybe 10 or 11, stood near the front bumper, taking in the terrain behind my cabin with genuine curiosity. At least one of them seemed to notice where they actually were. I stepped onto the porch before that could knock. The woman approached first, offering the kind of polite smile people used when they needed something from strangers. "Excuse me, are you Daniel Walker? The ranger station said you might have information about trail conditions up here." "I'm Dan, and I'm not officially with the ranger station, but yeah, I know the trails." The man joined us, extending his hand. "Michael Mitchell. This is my wife Rebecca and our kids, Emily and Ryan. We're planning to camp for the weekend. Maybe try some of the northern routes." I shook his hand but kept my expression neutral. "Northern routes, of course." They wanted the northern routes. "You folks, mind coming inside for a minute? There's some things you need to know before you head out." Michael glanced at his watch. We're actually hoping to get our camp set up before it gets dark. "This won't take long, but it's important." Rebecca touched her husband's arm. "We have time, Michael. I'd like to hear what he has to say." Inside, I pulled out the laminated sheet I kept on the kitchen table. 6 rules, handwritten in black marker, with a strip of duct tape along the top edge where I'd reinforced it after too many folding and unfolding sessions. The family gathered around the table, Emily hanging back near the door like she was already planning her escape. "These aren't suggestions," I said, tapping the paper. "People who ignore these rules have a habit of not making it home." Michael leaned forward to read, and I watched his expression change from polite interest to barely contained amusement. "Never follow square trail markers. Avoid trees with eyes. That's right. And don't drink the local water. Don't listen to music. Stay away from an old man in red." He looked up at me with a grin. "This is some kind of local folklore thing, right? Keep the tourists from wandering off the main trails." I'd had this conversation before too many times. The square markers lead to places you don't want to go. You'll see trees with bark patterns that look like eyes watching you. Stay away from those areas. The water in the streams and ponds up here will make you sick, but that's not the worst of it. If you hear music coming from the woods, don't investigate. If you see an elderly man in a red jacket, keep walking and don't make eye contact. And whatever you do, don't go near patches of bright yellow flowers." Emily rolled her eyes. "This is ridiculous. Come on, Dad, let's just go." Ryan stepped closer to the table. "What kind of music?" "Instrumental mostly. Sometimes sounds like children singing. Always faint like it's coming from far away. But it gets clearer the closer you get." "Ryan, don't encourage this," Emily said, crossing her arms. But the boy was studying the list seriously. "What happens if someone follows the square markers?" I looked at him, then at his prints. Rebecca was reading the rules carefully, though I could see the skepticism in her eyes. Michael had that indulgent smile adults wore when they were humoring someone they considered harmless, but eccentric. "People disappear," I said. "Last summer, 3 college kids ignored every one of these rules. Search and rescue spent a week looking for them. Never found so much as a backpack." Michael laughed. "Come on, man. You're trying to tell us there's some supernatural danger in a state park. I'm trying to tell you that these mountains don't follow these rules as other places. You can believe that or not, but the rules stay the same either way." Rebecca folded the paper carefully. "We appreciate the warning. Are there designated camping areas you'd recommend?" 2 miles up the main trail, there's a cleared spot with a fire ring. Has good water access from the ranger station. Pump, and you'll be well away from the restricted areas. "Restricted by who?" Michael asked. "By common sense." Emily made an exaggerated sighing noise. "Can we please just go set up camp? This is like something out of a bad horror movie." I stood up and walked them to the door. The family headed back to their SUV, Rebecca tucking my rules into her jacket pocket. Michael was already talking about hiking plans, his voice carrying that confident tone people used when they'd made up their minds about something. Ryan lingered near the driver's side door, looking back at my cabin. "Mr. Walker, have you actually seen the things you wrote about? More than I'd like." Emily had already climbed into the back seat. "Ryan, get in the car. We're not discussing ghost stories anymore." The boy nodded at me before joining his family. I watched them drive up the gravel road toward the main trail, their SUV disappearing around the first bend. Michael had barely glanced at the rolls, and Emily clearly thought the whole thing was a joke. Rebecca seemed like she might listen to reason, but she'd follow her husband's lead when it came to decision-making. Only Ryan had asked the right questions. I walked back into the cabin and checked the weather radio again. Clear skies forecasted for the next 3 days, which meant perfect hiking conditions. It also meant the family would probably to explore more than just the designated camping area. That familiar knot settled in my stomach. The same feeling I got every time visitors dies to my warnings as local superstition. Most of the time, families stuck to the main trails and went home with nothing worse than mosquito bites and tired feet. But every season, a few decided he knew better than the crazy mountain man with his handwritten rules. I looked at the backup copy of my list, identicalto, the one Rebecca now carried in her pocket. 6 simple rules that could save lives if they were smart enough to follow them. I woke early to check the radio again, though the forecast hadn't changed overnight. Clear skies, light winds, perfect conditions for familiesto, ignore common sense and wander into places they shouldn't go. The coffee was still brewing when movement caught my eye through the kitchen window. Grabbed my binoculars from the shelf and stepped onto the porch. There they were, about a 4-mile up the main trail, already packed and moving with purpose. Michael walked point, that confident stride of his carrying him past the warning signs I'd posted near the trail junction. Rebecca followed about 10 feet behind, stopping every few steps to look back toward the designated camping area. Even from this distance, I could read their reluctance in her body language. The kids trailed further back, Emily with her earbuds in, Ryan carrying what looked like a field guide. Michael paused at the first square marker, a blue metal plate nailed to a pine tree, and I watched him study it for maybe 3 seconds before continuing north. Rebecca stopped at the same spot, her head turning toward my cabin like she was considering coming back to ask more questions, but she didn't. Michael was already 50 yards ahead and she hurried to catch up. I lowered the binoculars and went back inside to finish my coffee. Nothing I could do now except wait and hope they'd stick to the outer trails. Maybe get spooked by the strange acoustics up there and turn back before encountering anything serious. Most families did, the smart ones. Anyway, 2 hours later, I was splitting firewood bend the cabin when something crashed through the underbrush at the edge of my clearing. Turned around to find Ryan Michael stumbling into the open, his face flushed red and his breathing coming in quick, shallow gasps. The boy looked like he'd been running hard for a long time. "Mr. Walker," he bent over, hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath. "Something's wrong, Yahav, to help." I set down the axe and walked over to him. "Where are your parents? Where's Emily?" "They're still up there at the stream." He straightened up, wiping sweat from his forehead. "We heard music coming from the woods like you said in your rules. Emily wanted to check it out, but I remembered what you told us." The kid was scared but thinking clearly, which was more than I could say for most adults who found themselves in some. "Tell me exactly what happened." Ryan nodded, gulping air. "Dad led us past those square markers you warned us about. Mom kept saying we should go back, but Dad said they were just trail markers, and you were being overcautious. We hiked for maybe an hour before we heard it. The music, yeah, it sounded like someone playing a flute, but really far away. Emily said it was probably just someone camping, but it didn't sound right. Too pretty, you know, like something from a movie." I walked toward the cabin, motioning for him to follow. "What did your parents do?" "Mom and Dad were looking for water to refill our bottles. They found this clear stream about 100 yards from where we first heard the music. I told them about rules about not drinking the local water, but Dad said that was just because of bacteria, and they had purification tablets. Already had my emergency pack in hand, checking the contents out of habit: water, first aid kit, rope, extra batteries for the flashlight. The rifle was in the gun case by the front door. The trees near the stream," Ryan continued, following me inside. "They were weird. The bark had these patterns that looked like faces, like they were watching us. I kept trying to tell Mom and Dad, but they were busy with the water." I pulled the rifle from his case and checked the chamber. "How long ago did you leave them?" "Maybe 20 minutes. The music got louder while they were filling the bottles. Emily said she was going to find where it was coming from. Mom told her to stay close, but Emily walked toward the sound anyway. That's when I ran. You did the right thing. We stepped back outside and I could hear it immediately. That faint haunting melody drifting down from thinner thorn trails. The tune started low and sweet, almost like a lullaby, then shifted into something more complex, more compelling. Ryan heard it too and moved closer to me, his face going pale. I knew that song. Same sequence of notes that had been playing 3 months ago when search and rescue found the abandoned campsite. Same melody that had drawn those college kids deeper into the mountains until they disappeared completely. Mr. Walk. Yeah, and it's getting stronger. Theme music had a quality that made your mind want to follow it, like it was pulling at something inside your head. I'd heard now stories from the few people who'd managed to resist its call. The tune would change, subtly, becoming more personal, more familiar, until it sounded like something from your childhood or a song someone you love used to hum. We need to move now. Ryan stayed close as we headed up the main trail, moving faster than I normally would, but keeping our steps measured and quiet. The music continued drifting through the trees, sometimes fading until I thought it had stopped, then returning stronger than before. Each time it came back, it sounded clearer, more detailed, like we were getting closer to its source, or like its source-wise getting closer to us. 20 minutes up the trail, Ryan pointed toward a break in the trees. That's where we went off the main path. Dad said the square markers were leading to better views. I could see the stream through the gap, sunlight reflecting off clear water. Number, sign of Michael or Rebecca. But their footprints were obvious in the muddy bank along with the deeper impressions of hiking boots. Emily's tracks, heading upstream toward a cluster of trees whose bark patterns were unmistakably alive. The music was coming from that direction, no longer faint, but clear and insistent. Each note hanging in the air, just long in auto, make you want to hear the next one, made my skin crawl in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with recognition. Time was running out. Whatever was playing that tune had already claimed Emily, and now it was drawing her parents deeper into the mountains. Soon it would be calling to something much worse than music, and the Mitchell family would learn exactly why I'd ridden those rules. The sound of Rebecca's voice carried through the trees before I could see her. Raw, desperate calls of Emily's name that echoed off the rock faces and came back empty. Ryan stayed close behind me as we pushed through the last stretch of undergrowth, toward the stream. Branches catching at my pack and rifle strap. Rebecca stood, kneed in the clear water, her hands cuped around her mouth as she shouted again. Tears streaked down her face, mixing with the sweat from their earlier hike. Michael paced along the muddy bank, his expensive hiking boots, leaving deep impressions. As he moved back and forth like a caged animal. Where is she? Rebecca's voice cracked on the words. Emily, Emily, answer me. Michael spotted us first. There, the kid found him. He jogged over, his face flushed with anger and panic. You need to call search and rescue right now. Our daughter is missing, I said. My pack down near a fallen log and studied the area. The stream curved around a cluster of boulders, creating a natural pool where the water ran clear and inviting. Empty water bottles sat on the bank next to Michael's backpack along with a small package of purification tablets. Too late for those to do any good now. Tell him what happened, I said, pulling out my binoculars. Rebecca waded back to shore, water streaming from her boots. She drank from the stream. We tried to stop her, but she was so thirsty and the water looked so clean. Her voice broke again. Then she started laughing. Said she heard children playing, somewhere upstream. I told her to stay close. Michaela did, running his hands through his hair. But she walked off anyway, following what sounded like kids having fun. We called after her, but she didn't stop. I scanned the opposite bank through the binoculars, tracking the obvious trail Emily had left through Thesof's ground. Her boot led away from the water in a straight line, heading upstream toward a section of forest, where the trees grew thicker, and the undergrowth formed dense patches of green. How long ago? 20 minutes? Maybe 25, Rebecca said. Right after Ryan left, I knew. I lowered the binoculars and examined the muddy bank more carefully. Emily's footprints were clear and easy to follow, but there was something else mixed in with them. Smaller. Impression shit looked almost like bare feet, child-sized, leading in the same direction. The prints appeared and disappeared in the mud, sometimes overlapping with Emily's tracks, sometimes Renemperlo. You see something? Michael demanded. Which way did she go? I pointed upstream where the prints headed toward a section of forest that looked different from the area around stream. The trees there had a gnarled appearance, their bark marked with the unmistakable eye-like patterns he'd warned them about. Between the twisted trunks, maybe 50 yards from where we stood. I could make out a patch of bright yellow that seemed to glow even in the filtered afternoon light. The flowers, exactly where I'd expected them to be. She went that way, I said, shouldering my pack again. But we're not following her. Not yet. Rebecca grabbed my arm. What do you mean we're not following her? She's my daughter. And if we go crashing through those woods right now, you'll lose more than just your daughter. I gently removed her hand from Miss Lee. The water she drank, it doesn't just make people sick. It makes them open to things that live deeper in these mountains. Michael stepped between us. Enough with supernatural garbage. Call the rangers. Call the state police. Call whoever you need to call. But we're getting professional help, not listening to more of your local folklore. I met his glare with a steady patience that came from having this conversation too many times. Search and rescue won't find her. Not in time, anyway. Not when shite's following sounds that aren't real and heading toward places that don't show up on their maps. The forest around us had gone completely quiet. No bird calls, no rustling of small animals in the underbrush, no buzz of insects. Even their stream seemed to run more softly, as if the water itself was trying not to make noise. Rebecca looked back toward the yellow flowers, squinting against the strange glow they cast between the trees. What are those? Something you didn't want to get close to. I checked my watch. 3:30 in the afternoon. The sun will start setting in a few hours. And everything changed after dark in these mountains. We need to head back to my cabin and plan this properly. Plan what? Michael's voice rose. My daughter is out there, possibly hurt, and you want to go back and make plans. I studied his face, seeing the desperation and anger that made people do stupid things in situations like these. The same expression I'd seen on dozens of parents over the years right before they made decisions that got their entire families killed. Your daughter is alive. But if we go charging in there, without knowing what we're dealing with, we'll all end up just as lost as she is. Something moved in the undergrowth beyond the yellow flowers. Just a glimpse of movement. Too quick and too large to be Emily, but definitely there. Ryan saw it too and moved closer to me, his eyes wide. Rebecca followed our gaze toward the flowers, then took a step in their direction. Emily, Emily, can you hear me? Don't. I caught her shoulder before she could take another step. Don't call out to her, and don't go near those flowers. Why not? Because Emily isn't the only thing that might answer. The movement in the trees stopped, but I could feel something watching us from the shadows beyond the yellow patch. Something that had been drawn by Rebecca's voice, and was now deciding whether we were worth its attention. Michael was still pacing, his frustration building towards something that would probably end badly for all of us. This is insane. We're wasting time with ghost stories while our daughter needs help. Your daughter needs help, I agreed. But not the kind that comes with search dogs and helicopter flyovers. The kind of help she needs requires waiting for the things that took her become more predictable in their movements. I started walking back toward the main trail, knowing they'd follow eventually. Rebecca looked torn between staying near the water where they'd last seen Emily and trusting the crazy mountain man who tried to warn them earlier. Michael looked ready to start a fight with Enion, who suggested his rational approach might not work. Ryan fell into step beside me, without hesitation. Mr. Walker, what happens after dark? Things get dangerous, I said, brutal so more honest. During the day, they hide and play games. At night, they show you what they really are. The silence stretched behind us as the parents made their choice. I could hear Rebecca's quiet crying and Michael's angry muttering. But eventually their footsteps followed us back toward the main trail. I'd done what I could to prepare them. Now, we had maybe 3 hours to get ready for what came next, when the sun went down and Emily's real rescue could begin. The hours between returning from the stream and sunset passed in careful preparation. I'd pulled every piece of gear I thought might help. Extra flashlights, climbing rope, emergency flares, and a first aid kit that had seen too much use over the years. The Mitchell family sat around the kitchen table, their earlier confidence replaced by the quiet tension of people who were starting to understand they were in over their heads. Rebecca kept checking her watch every few minutes, her hands trembling slightly when she thought no one was looking. Michael had stopped arguing about calling search and rescue after I'd shown him the topographical maps, pointing out exactly how many square miles of wilderness surrounded us and how easy it was for people to vanish without a trace. Ryan studied the equipment I was organizing, asking practical questions about how the rope worked and why we needed so many flashlights. By the time the sun started sinking behind the western peaks, I had everything ready. I handed each of them a heavy-duty flashlight and showed them how to attach the backup batteries to their belts. The rope went around my waist in careful coils, along with the emergency flares and a hunting knife that had saved my life more than once in these mountains. "Remember what I told you," I said, checking the rifle one more time. "Stay close, stay quiet, and whatever you see or hear out there, don't react unless I tell you to. Emily's alive, but where we're going, there are things that are Remac, more dangerous than getting lost." We left the cabin as the last light faded from the sky, heading north, Butte avoiding the main trail completely. I led them along a deer path that wound through sections of forests most hikers never saw, places where the trees grew thick enough to block the moonlight, and the ground stayed soft under decades of fallen leaves. The path was narrow, forcing us to walk single file with me in front, followed by Ryan and Rebecca, with Michael bringing up the rear. None of them complained about the pace, though I could hear their breathing getting heavier as we climbed through terrain that wasn't marked on any official trail map. 20 minutes into the hike, Rebecca's flashlight beam swept across something that made us stop walking entirely. "Dan," she whispered, "there's someone standing over there." I turned off my flashlight and motioned for the others to do the same. In the pale moonlight filtering through the canopy, I could make out the figure she'd spotted. An elderly man in a red jacket, standing perfectly still between two large oak trees, about 30 yards to our left. He faced our direction, but his head was tilted at an angle that suggested he was listening rather. "Keep walking," I whispered, barely loud enough for them to hear. "Don't look at him. Don't call out. Just follow me and keep moving." Ryan's hand found my shoulder as we started forward again, his grip tight with fear, but his step steady. Rebecca stayed close behind him, her breathing shallow and quick. I could feel Michael's tension radiating from the back of our small grip, the kind of aggressive energy that came from wanting to confront something he couldn't understand. As we passed the man in the red jacket, his head turned slowly to track our movement. The motion was too smooth, too deliberate, like a security camera pivoting on its mount. His face remained in shadow, but I caught the faint reflection of light where his eyes should have been. We walked maybe 50 yards past him before I risked a look back. The space between the trees was empty. The deer path curved downhill through a section of forest, where the trees had an ancient, twisted appearance. Their bark showed the distinctive eye-like patterns I'd warned them about. Dark hollows and raised ridges that formed unmistakable shapes in the rough surface. As our flashlight beams swept across them, the patterns seemed to shift and follow our movement, though I knew that was just the play of flight and shadow. Ryan noticed them, too. "Mr. Walker," he whispered. "The trees, they're watching us." "I know. Keep moving." We'd been hiking for almost an hour when the smell of wood smoke reached us through the still air. I held up my hand, stopping the group, and listened carefully. Somewhere ahead, maybe a 100 yards through the trees, I could hear the effing crackle of a small fire. No voices, no movement, just the quiet sound of burning wood in a forest that had gone completely silent around us. I motioned for them to follow me as we moved toward the smoke, stepping carefully to avoid making noise on the floor. The path opened into a small clearing where a fire burned in a ring of stones, the flames casting dancing shadows on the surrounding trees. Emily sat cross-legged beside the fire, staring into the flames with a distant expression that made my stomach cliff with recognition. She looked physically unharmed. Her clothes were clean, her hiking boots still tied properly, her backpack sitting neatly beside her on the ground. But something was wrong with the way she held herself. Too still and too focused, like she was listening to something none of us. "Cliff here." Rebecca stepped forward, her voice breaking with relief. "Emily. Oh God. Emily, we've been looking everywhere for you." Emily's head turned, her mother's voice with the same slow, deliberate motion I'd seen from the man in the red jacket. Her eyes reflected the firelight, but there was no recognition in them. No relief or fear or any emotion that belonged to a scared teenager who'd been lost in the woods for hours. "Hi, Mom," she said, her voice flat and distant. "I was waiting for you." The smile that spread across her face sent ice through my... It was Emily's mouth, Emily's teeth, but the expression belonged to something else entirely. She looked at each of us in turn, that vacant smile and ever-changing, her eyes unfocused like she was seeing through us rather than at us. I studied the cliff carefully, noting how the trees formed an almost perfect circle around the fire. Every trunk showed the eye-like bark patterns, dozens of them at different heights, all oriented toward the center where Emily sat. The arrangement was too precise to be natural, too deliberate to be coincidence. "Emily," I said carefully, keeping my voice calm, "we need to leave now. Your family is worried about you." She tilted her head, considering my words, like they were spoken in a language she bore lenders to leave. but I just got here. And look, she gestured toward the trees around us. They're all watching. They've been waiting to meet you. Michael stepped into the circle of firelight, his relief overriding the caution I'd been trying to drill into him all afternoon. Thank God you're safe. Come in, sweetheart. Let's get you home. The moment his boots crossed into the clearing, something massive crashed through the trees behind us. Branches snapped with sounds like gunshots, as whatever was moving out there pushed the undergrowth without any attempt at stealth. The noise came from the direction we'd traveled, cutting off a path back to the deer trail. Emily's vacant smile widened as she looked past us toward the sound. "Oh, good," she said. "He's here." Then she screamed, not in fear, but in pure delight, and ran deeper into the woods, disappearing gento, the darkness beyond the firelight before any of us could react. I turned toward the crashing sounds behind us, rifle ready as the truth hit me, like a physical blow. We'd walked straight into a trap. Emily hadn't been rescued. She'd been bait. And now all of us were exactly where something wanted us to be, surrounded by trees that watched our every move, and cut off from any chance of retreat. "Follow her," I shouted, swinging my rifle toward the crashing sounds. "Stay together and follow." "Emily." The noise behind us grew louder, branches snapping in rapid succession, like something large was bulldozing straight through the forest without caring what got in its way. Rebecca stumbled as she turned to run, catching herself against one of the watching trees before pushing forward into the darkness where Emily had disappeared. "This way," I called out, plunging in tough undergrowth beyond the fire circle. My flashlight beam cut through the trees, revealing broken branches and disturbed ground where Emily had passed. Ryan stayed close on my right, his breathing sharp but controlled. Michael and Rebecca crashed through the brush behind us, their new hiking gears nagging on every thorn and branch. Emily's voice reached us from somewhere ahead, not screaming now, but calling out words I couldn't make sense of. Her voice sounded strange, sing-song and cheerful, like she was playing hide with friends in her back. Instead of running through dark mountains filled with things that shouldn't exist, the ground sloped downward, forcing us to grab onto trees and rocks to keep from sliding. My boots found purchase on exposed roots and stone outcrop. Muscle memory. From decades of moving through this terrain, all kinds of conditions. Behind me, I could hear the Mitchell family struggling with the steep descent, their store-bought equipment no match for the reality of off-trail navigation. Rebecca called Emily's name, her voice awry with desperation. The sound echoed off the rock faces and came back, distorted, multiplied until it seemed like a dozen women were calling for lost daughters in the darkness. I wanted to tell her to stop. That noise carried too far in these mountains, and attracted attention we didn't want. But there wasn't time. The crashing sounds behind us had changed direction, not following our exact path, but circling around to the east, moving faster than anything that size should be able to move through thick forest. Whatever was chasing us knew these woods better than any human ever could. We pushed through a stand of young pines, their branches whipping at our faces and grabbing at our packs. Ryan grunted as a low branch caught him across the chest, but he kept moving without complaint. The kid had more backbone than his sister had shown before the mountain changed her. Emily's voice came again, closer now, but still ahead of us. This time, I could make out what she was saying. "Come and see, come and see, come and see." The words repeated over and over in that same cheerful tone, like a children's rhyme that had lost all meaning. We broke through the pine stand into another clearing, smaller than the one we'd left behind. In the center, maybe 20 yards from where we stood, Emily had stopped running. She stood perfectly still with her back to us, facing something that made the hair on my arm stand up. A circle of bright yellow flowers spread across the clearing center, each bloom the size of a dinner plate and glowing with an internal light that had nothing to do with reflected moonlight. The petals moved without any breeze, opening and closing in a rhythm that reminded me of breathing. Emily stood at the circle's edge, her head tilted like she was listening to music only she could hear. Emily. Rebecca stepped toward her daughter, but I caught her arm. "Don't get any closer to those flowers," I said. Michael joined us at the clearing's edge, sweat running down his face, despite the cool night air. "What are they?" Before I could answer, the crashing sounds exploded from the trees behind us. Close enough, now that I could hear individual branches breaking, could feel the vibration of heavy footsteps through the ground. Whatever had been following us was maybe 50 yards back and closing fast. I raised my rifle and aimed toward the sound, though I couldn't see anything clear enough to shoot at. Movement flickered between the trees, something large and pale that moved wrong, too fluid in some places and too rigid in others. It stepped into a patch of moonlight for just a second, and my blood went cold. The shape had been human once. The basic structure was there, 2 arms, 2 legs, a head. But everything was stretched and twisted like someone had taken a person and pulled them apart before putting the pieces back together incorrectly. Its arms hung too long, reaching almost to the ground, and its head sat at an angle that would have broken a normal person's neck. Pale skin gleamed in the moonlight, but there were dark patches that looked like bark or scales covering parts of its torso. It moved toward us with a horrible shambling gait, each step deliberate and wrong. When he turned its head in our direction, I caught a glimpse of eyes that reflected light like an animal's. But the intelligence behind them was something else entirely. I fired 2 shots into the air, that sound cracking through the forest like thunder. The rifle's report echoed off the surrounding hills, rolling back toes in waves that seemed to go on forever. The creature stopped moving, its head tilting as it listened to the echoes fade. For a moment, the forest went completely silent. No insects, no wind, no sound at all, except for our heavy breathing and the faint whisper of the yellow flowers moving in their unnatural rhythm. The creature took another step forward, and I worked the rifle's bolt, chambering another round. The metallic sound seemed to get its attention. It paused again, then let out a low, growling noise that sounded like it was trying to speak, but had forgotten how words worked. I didn't waste the opportunity. Moving fast but carefully, I crossed the clearing toward Emily, keeping the rifle ready and my flashlight trained on the trees where the creature waited. Emily didn't react to my approach, still staring down at the yellow flowers like they were the most beautiful things she'd ever seen. "Emily," I said quietly, "we need to go right now." She didn't respond. The flowers pulsed brighter, their glow reflecting in her wide eyes. This close, I could see the petals weren't really petals at all. They were more like thin membranes, translucent and veined like skin. Something moved beneath the surface of each bloom, a dark shape that shifted and writhed. I grabbed Emily's arm and pulled her away from the circle. The moment my hand touched her, she jerked like she'd been shocked. Her eyes cleared suddenly, the vacant expression disappearing as awareness flooded back into her face. "Mom," she said, her voice small and confused. "Where are we? What happened?" Then she saw the flowers and stumbled backward, almost falling. "Oh, God, what are those things?" Rebecca ran toward us, relief and terror mixing in her voice. "Emily, are you hurt? Are you okay?" "I don't know," Emily said, tears starting to run down her cheeks. "I can't remember. There was music, and someone was singing." And then she looked around the clearing like she was seeing it for the first time. "How did we get here?" The creature in the trees let out another sound, closer to a howl this time. It was moving again, crashing through the undergrowth, with renewed purpose. The warning shots had bought his map a minute, but whatever patience it had was running out. "We run," I said. "Now follow me, and don't look back." I led them away from the flower circle, angling northeast toward where I knew the old logging road cut through the mountains. The terrain was rough, but it was the fastest route to my truck and the only path that avoided the deepest parts of the forest where things go to ven, worse than what we'd already seen. Emily stayed close to her mother, both of them stumbling over roots and rocks, but keeping up with the pace I set. Michael brought up the rear again, his earlier skepticism completely gone, replaced by the focused determination of Simeon, who finally understood the stakes. Behind us, the creature crashed through the clearing where we'd found Emily. I heard it pause, probably confused by our scent trail near their flowers, then start after us again. But it moved more slowly now, like their distance from the flower circle weakened whatever hold this place had on it. We limbed through sections of forest I hadn't visited in months, following game trails and natural passages between therix. My legs burned from the constant uphill movement. But I pushed the pace harder, knowing we needed to reach the logging road before the thing behind us found its rhythm again. Ryan asked new questions, just followed where I led, and helped his sister when she stumbled. The kid would remember this night for the rest of his life, but he'd remember it as something he survived, rather than something that destroyed his family. That was the best anyone could hope for in these mountains. The trees started tothing as we climbed higher, and I could smell the different air that came with elevation and distance from the deep forest. We were getting close to the logging road, close to the truck, closetto, getting these people back to safety where they belonged. The creature's howls grew more distant as we climbed, but they didn't stop completely. It was still following, still hunting, but losing ground with every step we took toward the road. Whatever rules governed these things, they seemed to have a limit, boundaries they couldn't or wouldn't cross. We reached the logging road, just as the first pale light of dawn started to touch the eastern peaks. My truck stayed exactly where I'd left it, covered in morning dew, but untouched by whatever lived in the forest below. The sight of that familiar red paint and dented tailgate was better than any sunrise I'd ever seen. Emily collapsed against the truck's side, her legs finally giving out. She was crying steadily now, but the tears looked normal, human, nothing like it vacant expression she'd worn by the fire. Rebecca gathered her daughter into a fierce hug, both of them shaking with exhaustion and relief. Michael leaned against the truck's hood, his expensive hiking gear torn and muddy, his face pale in the growing light. "Jesus Christ," he said quietly. "What the hell was that thing?" I unlocked the truck and helped Emily into the passenger seat. She was physically unharmed, just exhausted and confused, with no memory of hours between drinking from the stream and waking up in the flower circle. That was probably for the best. From somewhere far below us, back in the deep forest, came one last howl, long and mournful, like something calling for a lost pack member. Death would never end. Then the sound faded as the sun climbed higher, and the supernatural presence that had stalked us through the night retreated to whatever dark places it called home. I started the truck's engine, the familiar rumble of the old V8, drowning out any remaining echoes from the forest. Emily had stopped crying and was staring out the windshield at the growing daylight, her hand pressed against the window like she was testing whether the glass was real. "You won't remember, Muchief, this," I told her. "That's normal. The mind protects itself from things it can't process." She nodded without looking at me. "Good. I don't want to remember." Their drive back to my cabin took 20 minutes on the winding logging roads. None of the Mitchell family spoke during that trip, but I could feel their relief growing stronger as we put distance between ourselves and the forest. By then we reached the main road. Michael was already talking about packing up their campsite and heading home immediately. I pulled into my driveway as the sun cleared the peaks, filling the valley with normal, safe daylight. The Mitchell family climbed out of my truck like people stepping off a life raft, grateful to be on solid ground, but still shaken by the experience of nearly drowning. Emily looked back toward the northern mountains one time, her face thoughtful and scared, then shunned away and walked toward their silver SUV, ready to leave these mountains forever. Her parents followed, and Ryan gave me a small nod of thanks before joining his family. They would pack their gear and drive away within the hour, back to their suburban lives where the worst dangers came from traffic and tax audits. They'd tell people they'd cut their camping trip short due to bad weather, and eventually they'd convince themselves that was true. The mountain would become just another family vacation story, edited and softened until all the sharp edges were worn away. I watched their SUV disappear around the first bend, knowing I'd never see any of them again. That was how it always worked in these unforgiving mountains. The smart ones left and never came back, and the foolish ones stayed until something claimed them permanently. The radio was still playing weather forecasts when I walked back into my cabin, promising 3 more days of clear skies and perfect hiking.